I lost my job and needed a place to stay. My in-laws offered their basement, then locked the door from the outside every night. I begged for air after they cut power in a heat wave. When I finally escaped, I left something behind that would change everything because I'm 42. I had a decent job, nothing glamorous. I worked for a construction firm in Columbus, Ohio, managing logistics and digital plans. Spent 10 years with the company. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't reckless. I worked hard, stayed loyal. But last year, things fell apart. A round of layoffs hit, and I was let go. No warning, no severance, just a gut punch. I thought I'd land on my feet. I'd never been unemployed before. But I was wrong. It was like falling into quicksand. I applied everywhere. Every job board, every contact I had. I sent out resumes nonstop. I burned through my savings faster than I thought possible. My wife, Stacy, worked part-time in medical billing. She tried to pick up extra hours, but it wasn't enough. We couldn't make rent. We were 2 months behind when we got the eviction notice. Stacy's parents, George and Marilyn, offered us their basement. They lived in a suburb called Upper Arlington. Nice area. George was a retired electrician. Always acted like he was better than everyone else. He didn't like me, never had. But he smiled through his teeth and told Stacy, "You two can stay in the basement until you get back on your feet." I didn't want to go, but we had nowhere else. The first night there, something fell off. George showed me the door to the basement. It had a separate entrance on the side of the house. "Just come and go from here," he said. "Don't need you tracking dirt through the main floor." It was like we were guests, but not really. Like we were a burden they were tolerating. The basement wasn't finished, not really. Cement floor, no ceiling insulation, a couple old couches, and a mattress on the ground. They tossed a cheap bookshelf and a plastic table in the corner. That was it. No windows that opened. The only ventilation was a fan plugged into the wall. I noticed the lock on the door that night. A big keyed deadbolt on the outside. I didn't think much of it at first. Until around 10:30 p.m. when I stepped out to take the trash to the bin. When I tried to come back in, the door wouldn't budge. I knocked. Nothing. I texted Stacy, and she finally came down to open it 15 minutes later. "My dad locked it," she whispered. "He thought you were in already." That became the routine. Every night, they locked us in. No explanation. No warning. Just click. Door locked. Like we were kids or criminals. I brought it up one night over dinner. "Why do you lock the basement door every night?" I asked, trying to stay calm. George didn't even look up. "Don't need people roaming the house at night. This isn't a hotel. People. Not family. Not even by name. Just people." It only got worse. The heat started building in late July. Ohio summers aren't kind. That basement turned into a concrete oven. I'd wake up soaked in sweat. The fan did nothing. Stacy begged them to turn on the AC. George said it didn't reach the basement, and anyway, you're not paying rent. Then one morning, I woke up and everything was dead. No power. Fan wasn't spinning. The little lamp we used didn't turn on. I checked the breaker panel, switched off. Just the basement. I flipped it back on. That night, it was off again. I confronted George. "We can't breathe down there. It's over 90 degrees. I need the fan." "You're not paying utilities," he said. "Don't like it? Get a job." That night was the worst of my life. I laid on the mattress, my shirt drenched in sweat, trying not to panic. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I felt dizzy, nauseous. I got up and banged on the locked door. No answer. I texted Stacy over and over. "Please come. Please unlock the door. I need air." Nothing. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, Stacy came down, bleary-eyed. "You're waking my parents up," she said. I didn't even respond. I just stumbled out of the basement and collapsed on the hallway floor. George stood there with his arms crossed. "Maybe if you had a job, you'd have a real place to live." That moment, that's when something broke in me. This wasn't a rough patch anymore. This was psychological warfare. They weren't just helping us get back on our feet. They were trying to humiliate me, to crush me. And Stacy? She stopped defending me, stopped even really talking to me, just faded into whatever they told her to be. I had to get out. I knew that. But I also knew one thing George didn't. Before I lost my job, I managed cloud storage and data encryption for the firm. I'd set up a secure server backup for our blueprint and permit system. Nobody ever revoked my admin access. That wasn't my revenge plan at first. But it stayed in the back of my mind. What I did do, starting week 2, was set up a recording system in the basement. I had my old iPhone, and I rigged it to record audio overnight. Later, I added a cheap motion-triggered camera hidden behind the old bookshelf. Every insult, every night they locked us in, every time I begged for power or air, it was all on file. Eventually, a friend I hadn't talked to in years saw a post I made in a local job group. He offered me a place to crash in Dayton. It was just a garage with a futon, but it had airflow, and it wasn't locked from the outside. I left the basement quietly one morning while George was still asleep. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even leave a note. But I left something behind in that basement. Something they didn't find. Not right away, because I wasn't just surviving down there. I was building something, documenting everything. And once I got out, I started putting the rest of the plan together. I didn't plan revenge right away. At first, I just focused on surviving. My friend's garage in Dayton wasn't much. It smelled like oil and mildew, but it felt like freedom. He let me stay as long as I needed. I bought a small fan from a thrift store, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I got a part-time job within 2 weeks. Warehouse work, heavy lifting. Nothing close to what I used to do, but I showed up every day and didn't complain. I started saving every dollar. I didn't text Stacy. She didn't text me either. The silence said it all. But I kept looking at those recordings. Hours of footage. George yelling, Stacy ignoring me, Marilyn making snide comments about freeloaders like I wasn't even there. Audio of them locking the deadbolt every night. Clear as day. A few clips had George talking about me like I was some kind of criminal. He even said once, I should have called the cops and had him removed. He's a grown man living in my house for free. Like a squatter. I was shocked how cold Stacy sounded on some of the recordings. I kept hoping to hear her defend me. She never did. Then I found something that stopped me cold. It was a video from the night the power was cut. You could hear me breathing heavy, pacing, stumbling around. I was clearly overheating. I banged on the door. I called for help. Then, on the audio, you hear George say something to Marilyn upstairs. She's going to cave soon. I told you. Let him suffer a bit longer. I didn't know who she was at first, but the next clip cleared it up. I don't want to keep locking him in, Stacy said. George replied, this is how you train a man. Break him down. You think he's ever going to be a provider again if you baby him. She didn't argue. She just said, okay. I sat in that garage shaking with rage. That wasn't just cruelty. That was control. That was psychological abuse, done together, as a family. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't just going to move on. They were going to pay. I didn't go straight to the police or post everything online. That would have been easy, but I wanted it to hurt the way they made me hurt. I started by reaching out to my old company. Technically, I was still listed as a user on their backend system. So I emailed the IT manager from a clean, new Gmail account and let them know, you have a former employee who still has full server access. Might want to revoke that before something goes wrong. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. They cut off my access in less than 24 hours. But I left behind a trace of my name, enough to let someone in upper management know I had been watching. Let the thought fester. Then I filed a claim with the local housing board, quietly, using my new address. I sent them the audio files. I made copies of the nights I begged to be let out, the voice recordings of Stacy and George discussing locking the door, cutting power, denying air. I labeled it all under unsafe living conditions and potential domestic confinement. I used a burner number for follow-up calls. They said they were reviewing the materials closely. That's all I needed to hear. Then I started dropping seeds. I created a Reddit account, posted anonymously in local threads. Man kept in in-laws locked basement during Heatwave has hours of recordings. The post blew up. I never gave names, never mentioned addresses. But Columbus is a small city. And George? He was well known in a couple retired electrician circles. All it takes is one person to connect the dots. A few weeks later, Marilyn called me. She left a voicemail. You think you're clever? Posting lies online? This is harassment. You're sick. I saved the message. I didn't respond. A few days after that, I found out from my friend's neighbor, a guy who still worked in Columbus City maintenance, that inspectors showed up at George and Marilyn's place. Someone had reported illegal tenant conditions and code violations involving basement renovations and power manipulation. They weren't ready for that. Apparently, George never had the right permits for that basement remodel. And worse, He'd done the electrical work himself, years after his license expired. The inspectors came back with a city officer and a warrant. They took photos. They took notes. And from what I later heard through the grapevine, they took serious issue with a few things. Especially that deadbolt. I still hadn't spoken to Stacy. Not a word. I figured she'd either left or doubled down with her parents. But I was wrong. Because one night, 2 months after I left, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was her. She was crying. "They're blaming me," she said. "They said I let it happen. That it's my fault the city's investigating. My dad's losing everything. What did you do?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You let them lock me in there. And you watch me suffer." She hung up. That could have been the end. But it wasn't. Because I still hadn't used the one thing I left behind that would take all of them down permanently. And when I finally did, they never saw it coming. After Stacy called me, I thought that might be the last of it. I'd hit them hard. George and Marilyn were facing city inspections, possible fines, and serious questions about the way they treated someone living under their roof. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because 3 weeks later, I got served. It was a civil lawsuit, filed by George and Marilyn against me. The charge? Defamation and invasion of privacy. They claimed I had secretly recorded private conversations in their home and then distributed false and malicious statements online with the intent to damage their reputation. I couldn't believe it. They were actually trying to drag me into court. After everything they did. I sat there holding the papers in that garage, feeling that old heat rise in my chest again. The same heat I felt on those nights when I couldn't breathe. They wanted to flip the script. Make me the villain. I didn't have money for a lawyer, but I had something better, evidence. I went straight to legal aid, brought my recordings, the housing board documentation, everything. The intake lawyer listened to maybe 10 minutes of audio before he said, "We'll help you." Turns out, Ohio's a one-party consent state. I had every right to record what happened in the basement because I was the one being recorded. And more than that, what I posted online wasn't even tied to their names. No address. No pictures. Just a story that happened to be true. I countersued for unlawful confinement. And something else, intentional infliction of emotional distress. But that's not even the twist. While digging through all my old files, I found something I hadn't realized I still had, an email archive from my old job. All my work correspondence. I had exported it by habit before I got laid off. Buried inside were emails from subcontractors and vendors, some of them flagged with questions about George. See, George didn't just do retired handyman stuff. Turns out, he'd been doing electrical work under the table, using Stacy's uncle's expired business license. Some of the permits I helped file? They listed George's fake business as the subcontractor. That meant several commercial properties in Columbus could be flagged as having illegal or non-certified work. I never knew. I was just the middleman at the time. But now, I knew exactly what it meant. So I compiled everything, the emails, the blueprints, the timelines, the permits, and I sent it, anonymously, to the Ohio Licensing Board and the city building inspector. I thought that was enough. But then I got another surprise. Stacy reached out again. Only this time, it wasn't to cry or blame. She wanted to meet. I almost didn't go, but I did. We met at a diner just off Route 33. She looked tired, nervous, different. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know how bad it was for you down there." I mean, I did, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. She told me something I wasn't ready for. "That wasn't the first time my dad's done something like that," she said. "When I was in college, he locked my boyfriend in the garage once. Overnight. Said he didn't want him sneaking around. I told myself it was just him being strict. But it was control. She admitted she'd let her parents manipulate her. That she'd chosen comfort over truth. But now, she said, she was done. She moved out. She was staying with a friend. Then she handed me a flash drive. "You need to see this," she said. "It's from the security system he installed upstairs. He forgot to disable the cloud backup." I took it home and opened the files. Footage. Dozens of hours. Audio and video from upstairs. Conversations between George and Marilyn. Things they never thought would be recorded. One clip. George telling Marilyn, "If that bastard ever tries to come after us, I'll say he was abusive. I'll say he hit Stacy. I'll ruin him." Another clip. Marilyn laughing about the inspectors. "We'll just say he was mentally unstable. Nobody believes broke men." I felt like I was going to be sick. They weren't just cruel. They had planned this. They had a script in case things went public. They were going to destroy me completely if I ever fought back. But now? Now I had their plan on tape. And that changed everything. I didn't rush it. I sat with that footage for a week. I played it over and over. George planning to accuse me of abuse. Marilyn laughing about lying to protect him. I kept thinking about all the nights I lay sweating in that basement, thinking maybe I was the crazy one. Maybe I deserved it. But I didn't. And now I had everything I needed to prove it. The court date came fast. George and Marilyn showed up in their Sunday best. George had a smug look on his face, like he was already planning the victory dinner. Stacy didn't sit with them. She sat in the back row, arms crossed, looking straight ahead. When they took the stand, George went first. He told the court I was unstable, depressed, and angry, that I'd refused to contribute financially and had violated their privacy. Then I stood up. I didn't say much. I just submitted the recordings, the inspection reports, and the video files from the security system courtesy of Stacy's flash drive. The courtroom was dead silent when the clips played. You could hear George's voice clearly, talking about letting me sweat it out. You could see him twisting the deadbolt at night. You could hear Marilyn joke about blaming me if it ever came back to them. Even their lawyer looked shaken. The judge recessed the hearing and ordered an emergency investigation into possible false accusations and coercive behavior. George's lawsuit against me was dismissed on the spot. My countersuit stayed open, and the judge said the evidence was compelling and extremely troubling. That was just the beginning. The city hit George with $48,000 in fines for unlicensed electrical work. Another $10,000 for illegal basement occupancy and code violations. Stacy confirmed under oath that George had been working under a dead license, and I turned over the email evidence to the state licensing board. They revoked his eligibility for any future contracting work, permanently. Within 2 months, George and Marilyn had to sell their house to cover their legal fees and fines. The shame alone gutted them. George tried to spin the story to friends, said I was a hacker who tricked them. Nobody bought it. As for Stacy, she asked if we could talk again, said she wanted to rebuild. But I told her no. I told her I spent months locked in a hole, begging her for help, while she stood upstairs and let it happen. That's not something you come back from. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I just let her go. I found a real job again. Nothing fancy, but solid work with people who respect me. I live in a modest place now. Just a 1-bedroom in Dayton. I don't have much, but I sleep in a bed that isn't in a basement, and no one locks the door at night. Sometimes I still hear that deadbolt in my dreams. But when I wake up, I know what I did. I didn't just survive them. I ended them. Piece by piece, truth by truth. I made them face every single thing they tried to bury. And now, they live with the fallout. Not me.